Hi guys, I'm David with MediaUnlock.net. Today I want to talk about the Nikon Z7 and Z6 cameras. As most of you know, I left Canon earlier on this year to buy the Sony a7R III and the a7 III, so I'm a big fan of the mirrorless system, which I think is going to slowly take over the market. And there are a lot of reasons why. We're not going to dive into those today. So the big thing that I want to talk about the Nikon camera, I'm not a huge Nikon fan just because I've never really shot with Nikon. I think their color science is good. I think for the most part they make a good full frame camera, and some of their crop sensor cameras are pretty good as well. But going into the photography game back when I did 10, 15 years ago now, you kind of went Nikon or Canon, and that was kind of your only option. I ended up going Canon, and so I never really shot a lot with Nikon. However, I have a lot of respect for Nikon's camera. Their color science has always been excellent. Their ISO has always been pretty good in the low light sensitivity. And so I've read a lot of blogs. I have watched a lot of videos on these cameras that are coming out, the Z7 and the Z6. So this is not going to be a big tech spec video. I'm going to do my best to kind of read in between the lines of what people are talking about, because I feel like there's a lot of videos where I watch where people are just ranting and raving about it, and then people were not ranting and raving about it on the other end of the spectrum, and there's some people that are, I think, more down to earth and picking out problems that are legitimate with this Nikon system. So I'm going to do my best to read between the lines and really talk about the things that I think are most important, that I really like about the Nikon, and the things that I really think that Nikon failed. So let's dive right into just some of the basic specs here. I had to make myself a trusty sheet of information here. So just some basic stats to go over. The Z7 is going to cost you around $3,400, body only. It's going to be a 45 megapixel full frame mirrorless camera. The Z6 will run you about $2,000, 24 megapixels. And if you go on and get the F to Z mount, which we're going to talk a little bit about here in a minute, then you're going to save yourself about $100 on the F to Z mount. If you just go on and get the body only with the F to Z mount, that's going to run you like $2,150. Now, if you just want to buy just the F to Z mount by itself, it's going to run you $250. And another thing to mention is the Nikon D850 is going to run you about $3,200, and you can probably find it cheaper than that if you get it used. The reason I'm talking about the Nikon D850, the Z7 was pretty much built to compete with the Nikon D850, and after everything that I've seen, it doesn't even come close to competing. So if you're thinking about getting into the full frame market, I'm going to tell you right now, Nikon's mirrorless camera is not going to be your option. You're going to want to look at one of Nikon's full frame bodies that are non-mirrorless if you're wanting to get into the full frame game or get another full frame camera, in my opinion. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are going to be on the camera that I like and don't like. So it has the XQD card, but it only has one XQD card. Now, a lot of people are really unhappy with this. And as a wedding photographer and a commercial photographer and videographer, I can really see the value in having two card slots, especially when I'm shooting a wedding video. The two card slots really come in handy. The nice thing is you can get pretty large cards and you hope that they don't fail, and one card should get you through the day. We did it for, I don't know, 10 years before two card slots became a norm in camera bodies back in, 2010, 2011. So I was shooting weddings well before then with only one card slot, and I did just fine. Never lost it. I never had a card go bad and it ruined a wedding. Now, however, I do like the two card slot option, and I would like to have seen two card slots in this Nikon system. But I don't think it's necessarily a deal breaker like everyone is talking about. And it has the XQD, which is a pretty superior card form far as media goes. It's pretty quick, and I really like it. So they are a little bit thicker than like an SD card, and SD cards as of right now are going to be a little bit slower than an XQD card. So that is one nice thing, is you're going to get a fast card. But again, I shoot 4K at 24 frames. That's what I'm shooting right now on my Sony a7R III, and it is able to shoot 4K just fine, and it's beautiful. And I'm using SD cards versus QXD. So do we need the QXD right now? One of the big things that I think Nikon failed in is they didn't put in an eye detection automatic eye focus. This is something that I absolutely love about Sony systems, is that I'm able to hit a little button, it's going to find the eye, and it's going to focus on it. This really helps with getting tack focus, especially when I'm working with animals or people, as when you're looking at a picture of an animal or a person, the first thing you're going to notice is how sharp the eye is. It's just how we look at photography, how we look at pictures. Maybe that's not for everybody, but for me, that's the first thing I'm going to look at. So having that eye detection, I think, is very important. And I would have liked to seen that in the Nikon system. I mean, Sony's already had it. I mean, Nikon, they know they have it, so Nikon should know that this is something that needs to be put in a mirrorless body. The next thing is the face detection. Nikon did put a face detection, which is supposed to kind of compete with the eye detection, which Sony already has. And the face detection, from what I can tell watching the videos, reading the blogs, it's pretty slow and laggy. And it doesn't do a great job, and you're going to miss focus quite a bit, which is a little frustrating, because if you're not going to give me the eye detection, then at least give me the face detection that works. And it didn't work really well. Nikon does claim they can get 9 frames per second, but realistically, it looks like you're getting 5 to 6 frames per second. You get a lot of lag at 9 frames per second for your card to be able to keep up with it, but you have the QXD card, so it should be faster, right? So with that 5 to 6 frames, Tony and Chelsea Northup, great YouTube channel, they said it missed a lot of the, and I even watched the video of where Tony and Chelsea were just walking and taking pictures, and at 5 to 6 frames, it was definitely missing autofocus points, which is really frustrating. So that is something that is a letdown, because, again, the Sony cameras, they're giving me RAW at, I think, 8 to 9 frames per second. I never really need to use all that, and it buffs right up to, I think, 90 at RAW, so I can do 9 seconds at 9 frames per second before the camera starts to buff out, and I have to wait a second for it to catch up. So the F to Z mount, I really like this. This is really smart of Nikon to be bringing some kind of, and what the F to Z mount really allows you to do is put your F mount lenses on the new Z mount mirrorless camera. So that is really smart, I think, of Nikon to do this. The problem is that, from what I gather, that it does not work as well with non-VR lenses. So if you have a non-VR lens and you connect it to your mainly Nikon mirrorless camera with the F to Z mount, the non-VR lenses don't focus as well. So that is kind of a drawback. And I read this on a couple different blogs, and one person mentioned it on a video. So, however, with the VR lenses, it worked pretty well, throwing like, your 7200 VR on there, and it worked pretty well with that. Okay, this is something that nobody seems to want to put into their cameras. Not Sony, not Nikon, not Fuji. Come on, guys, mirrorless cameras, no articulating screen. We want that little screen that flips out to the side like the Canon 6D Mark II. That's the one great thing Canon has done. We want it to flip out to the side so we can do the blogging, we can go up here. We don't want that little screen that comes out of the back and does this little number, okay? So again, that's something that Nikon, something I think simple that Nikon could have done that would have really helped them. A really small feature they could have added that would have been a big deal, because everyone wants it on all of their camera systems and no one's offering it, minus Canon's 6D Mark II and some of the other Rebel series cameras. But that's pretty much the only place you're seeing it in a camera. All right, so I did think this is really cool. They're going to use a large lens mount. So the actual metal piece that your lens connects into, it's 55 millimeters. So what that means is, being so much larger, and I think the Nikon D850, I think, is like low 40s, like 42, 43 millimeters, so it's a much smaller diameter. So what that means is that Nikon's going to be able to use this new glass that they're hoping to come out with, that's going to allow you to get a really wide aperture, really fast glass. I think they're talking about putting a 55 millimeter, like 0.95 out, and 58 millimeter 0.95 out next year. And so that wider connection for your lenses allows for better low light, faster glass, which I think is really cool. And I'm interested to see where Nikon goes with this. Because that's one thing that every photographer, videographer wants is faster glass if it exists. If there's a way to get more light into your lens, onto your sensor, we want it and we'll pay for it if it works well and it's sharp and it looks good. So I'm interested to see how that goes. I'm interested to see how that lens looks when they start to come out with it. All right, so this is the best autofocus on a Nikon camera to date for video. Here's the problem. It's still not that good in my opinion. I watched some video of people shooting video with the Nikon Z7 mirrorless camera. It's definitely slower than Sony and Canon, and it takes a second for it to find the focus point sometimes. The sad thing is this is the best that Nikon's put out to date, and to me, it's still well outdated how well it works. And then the other thing is that you do get full 4K, but here's the deal. This is something else that I don't know why no one's really doing this except the GH5, and it's a crop sensor camera, so you're not getting the good low light situation, is 4K at 60p. Now, as a wedding videographer, I like to shoot at 60p because it allows me to go in and slow certain stuff down. So throughout the whole entire day, minus very specific shots, if there's movement in the shot, I am shooting at 60p, 1080 on my Sonys. However, Nikon, if they had offered me 4K at 60p, this would have been a big deal for me because being able to shoot full 4K at 60p, allowing me to slow the footage down, only the Panasonic GH5 really does it. And it's crop censored, so it's not a full frame camera. I think this is another thing that Nikon missed out on. In my opinion, Nikon looked at the A7 II or the A7 R2 and said, let's make this camera. The problem with that is Sony's already so far ahead of them with so many different features that they offer us. So let's talk a little bit about my personal thoughts. One of the big things that a lot of people are asking, should I upgrade to this Nikon camera? My answer is no. If you want to spend that kind of money, go buy another Nikon D850. That thing is a beast for the price. It is amazing. I love that camera. I've shot on it once, and even though I'm not a Nikon guy, like, it's a great camera. It's a great DSLR. It does not, these new Z6 and Z7, they're just not going to compete with it. Now, if you just have money or you just think that you have to be in the mirrorless game, you know, that this is a must, then yeah, I would look at maybe upgrading to the Nikon if you've got a lot of Nikon glass and accessories. Reason being is that you can take your glass on over with the F to Z mount, and it allows you to actually use your glass on your new Nikon mirrorless camera. So yes, if you need to, then go for the upgrade if you've already got the glass. Here's the thing. In my opinion right now, unless you've got a lot invested in a Nikon and you want to go mirrorless, Fuji, Sony are making great products right now. In my opinion, Sony makes the best mirrorless camera on the market. They hold the market share in North America. They are the #1 mirrorless seller in North America, and they may be the #1 camera seller right now in North America for full frame cameras. So that tells you a lot about what Sony's doing. Sony's very innovative because they actually listen to their customers, and that's what I really like about them. That is where Canon and Nikon have failed the last 5 or 6 years. They think that they know what the customer wants instead of asking the customer what we want. And at the end of the day, we, the consumer, we're going to control the market. Now, I wanted Nikon to come out with a great camera here because that means it puts pressure on Sony to keep being innovative, and it gives it, you know, Sony doesn't own the market share. So now there's a little bit more fight on both ends, so that Sony's trying to outdo Nikon, Nikon's trying to outdo Sony, and it's all great for the consumer because we're always going to get a better product at the end of the day. The problem is Nikon, in my opinion, really failed here. Nikon is putting out a full-frame mirrorless camera that is not ready to go to market, in my opinion, because it can't compete in the market that already exists. It's going to come into the market, some people are going to buy it, but it's not going to do well, in my opinion. Now, one other thing to mention is their lens setup. Now, the good thing is that over the next, I think, 2 or 3 years, they've got a scheduled of like what lenses are coming out, and they're going to have, I think, 7 or 8 lenses over the next few years. The lenses that are going to come out when this thing is first launched, that is for the Z mount, is you're going to get a Nikon 24 to 70 millimeter f4. I don't know who makes a 24 to 70. That's a weird focal length, and it's going to be an f4. They're going to make a 35 millimeter 1.8 and a 50mm 1.8. Now, here's the ridiculous thing here. The 24-70 f4 is going to be $1,000. $1,000. The 35 1.8 is going to be $850. And the 50mm 1.8 is going to run you $600. A 1.8 50mm is going to be $600. Okay, Sony does make a really crappy, their 1.8 50mm, which I have, which I'm not happy with, has some focusing issues, is $200. You can get, I think it's a 55 1.4 Zeiss that's amazing for like $600 or $700. It's $600 for a 50-1.8. That is ridiculous to me. I can't even imagine what they're going to price the rest of their lenses as they come out. So that's another thing to look at. If you want to get into the mirrorless system and you just want to buy the glass that's available as it becomes available, you're going to pay a mint. Where you could switch systems and get much better glass at a much cheaper price. And that's the one thing that people have always complained about with Sony is really expensive glass for their mirrorless cameras. And their glass is expensive. The 24-70 G Master is like $2,500. 24-7 2.8, I mean, that's an expensive piece of glass. The thing is, this Nikon glass is going to be even more expensive, so it's kind of ridiculous, in my opinion. So my final thoughts are, you probably should not upgrade to this camera whatsoever. You should look at moving to a different system. You should consider just buying another Nikon full-frame DSLR that's non-mirrorless, because they have some great cameras. I think the guys over at Sony, and Jason Lanier said this best, they're probably having a party right now. They were probably a little bit worried and sweating a tiny bit to see what Nikon was going to come out with and see if it was going to compete with the Sony system. And anybody that really knows mirrorless cameras and knows the type of features that Sony offers compared to what Nikon's offering is here, knows that Sony's still gonna run the market. Nobody's still gonna compete with Sony, not yet. Sony made so many mistakes, or we'll just say Sony learned as they kept putting out their new mirrorless cameras. They learned from what worked and what didn't. They listened to the consumer. That's not what Nikon did here. And supposedly Canon is going to be coming out with a mirrorless camera sometime in the next couple months. They're going to be announcing it. And if Canon's watching me right now, if Canon's watching anything, you can't come to the market with what Nikon's offering. You can't come to the market with technology that, in my opinion, is 2 years old. Sony's already done it. They've already got better options. They've got better specs in their cameras than what Nikon's coming to the market with right now. So Canon needs to take heed, and if they come out with a mirrorless camera, and I'm guessing since they're going to be making an announcement, they probably already got at least some of the pieces put together. Now, one thing to mention is that this Nikon camera that everyone's been testing is a beta version, but I can't believe that the firmware and some of the other options that are going to change that much from the time that the beta version or the pre-release version compared to the actual released version. I don't think there's going to be that big of a difference from what people are already using. So that is one thing to mention. But again, Sony's dominating the market, and they're not worried about what Nikon's coming to market with, as they should not be, because Nikon's not really offering us anything special here. Nikon's just hoping that a bunch of Nikon fanboys, fangirls, are going to jump on board and buy their product, and then they're going to realize they're probably not that happy with it, and that it's a really expensive piece of equipment that doesn't offer a lot. So hopefully Canon does a better job here when they put out their announcement on their mirrorless camera. And Nikon, Canon, listen to your consumer. Don't anticipate what we want. Ask us what we want. That's what Sony does. That's why I switched to Sony, because I saw the innovation. I saw that things that people wanted were put in their cameras. Jason Lanier, kind of bouncing back to him, he talks about how Nikon or Sony headquarters brought him in and talked to him for like 4 or 5 hours about the features that we as photographers and videographers want. They brought a photographer in and asked him what he wanted. And then they did their best to, I believe, put some of those features in some of their new cameras. So that's a big deal for me. That's one of the reasons why I've switched over to Sony, and I'm so happy with them. And if you really want a mirrorless camera and you're not happy with the Nikon, look at the Sonys. They're amazing. So as always, guys, we're going to add some links in. If you guys do decide you actually want to buy this Nikon camera, go on and click on those links. It does help us with a little commission, keep making these videos. And we always appreciate you stopping in and watching our videos, and we'll catch you next time.
You guys have made it this far. If you want to check out our newest video, it will be right here. If you want to check out the product, it will be down here. If you do happen to click on it and purchase it, it does give us a little bit of commission, and that helps me a lot keep making these videos. And of course, guys, right down below, go and leave a comment, hit that subscribe button, follow along. We'll catch you next time.